Pop culture diagnosis is a segment where we take a person or character from a TV show or movie and assess their mental state, or, as we say in the medical field, figure out what the hell is going on with them. Meg, can you give listeners a quick synopsis of the wildly successful movie Encanto and who in particular you wanted to diagnose today?
Yes. Now, Encanto has blown up since its streaming premiere on Disney. It is like my son. Always, mind you, he's only 3, so he has seen like bits and pieces of the movie because he doesn't have a full attention span. But the one thing he knows is that song. They don't talk about Bruno, no, and like I will hear random kids singing that before I really knew what it was. I was like, who is Bruno? Like, what are they
Right.
talking about? And it's from the movie Encanto. And Encanto, the award-winning movie Encanto, I will say, because it is that great. It centers on the Madrigals, who are a family who have these. Everybody in the family has some kind of like magical power. Encanto is the place where they live in the mountains of Colombia, and it's just a really like beautiful story. But the thing about it is, this is probably one of the first Disney movies that I've seen that I really thought about. Like, there's a lot of intergenerational trauma within this movie, and like a lot of Disney movies have it, but this one shows like how what happened to the grandmother affected her kids, which affected their kids. And, the person that we're going to talk about is the highly ostracized uncle, which is Bruno. And he's the main character, Mirabelle's uncle. He basically, his magical gift was to see the future. And he, spoiler alert, so fast forward if you want to hear it, but he basically tells, he sees what's going to happen with his family. And because he doesn't want Mirabelle, people to look down on her because it's kind of going to come from her, he decides that he'd rather just kind of like live in isolation. Nobody knows where he is. He kind of just goes into hiding and conceals himself because he just doesn't want that burden to be on her. Because when he tells his vision, people seem to think that he's conjuring up like an evil future. And he's like, no, that's really what's going to happen. So we're going to talk about Bruno today. We are talking about Bruno. I just had to do that. We're going to talk about Bruno today. So what do you think about this movie and Bruno in particular, Imani?
So it's funny, like when it comes to Disney movies, I mean, we all love Disney movies, but Disney movies in particular like always get me like so emotional. Like, I don't know, like there was that little short bow about the mom. Did you see that one? Like it was
Yeah.
before Incredibles 2, which is like I cried in the Incredibles. Like I'm just like that person. But like me and my son were like in the movie theater like bawling at like Bow. I saw Red Panda recently. Like I was just like, oh my God, I totally understand this. And I never saw Encanto, and especially because my son's a little older, he's like, obviously he's 15. He's like, I'm not watching that. But when I saw Encanto, and when I saw the musical number, like We Don't Talk About Bruno, like it made me so sad.
Yeah.
Like it made me so sad. I was just like, oh my God, I can't, like, poor Bruno. Like it just like anytime there's, anyone who's really like, I know anyone who's really, really mentally ill, it just really like my heart just goes out to them, which, explains a lot about why I chose psychiatry as a career. But I was just like, oh my God, this makes me so sad. Part of it too, I think, is because I have a cousin, one of my cousins in my family. He has issues with psychosis, and he will, he hears voices, he has delusions, and he doesn't take medication. And that's his right. He's an adult. He doesn't have to. I mean, the rest of my family wishes that he would, but it just kind of reminded me of my cousin, who it pretty much isolates to himself because he has voices that he can talk to, and he's completely like happy with that. And and to our best efforts as far as my family, like he's just like, no, this is where I want to be, and like this is my right, which it is. But that being said, when I saw Bruno and kind of like the state that he was in, like he's in the dark and, you know, he's like, he loves his family so much, but like it's like he doesn't want to like bother them. Like he wants to help them from afar. It just really, really made me sad. But I also loved how Encanto was able to really tackle like such heavy topics. Like, first of all, you mentioned intergenerational trauma, which is a very real thing. And it is, there is a doctor named Rachel Yehuda, and she has done studies of the offspring, the children, and I believe also the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, and was able to show how there actually are, I believe, genetic changes to DNA in that are passed down. So even though, for example, someone could have gone through trauma in their life, their DNA would get passed down to their offspring, and then their offspring would, you know, have children. But like there are genetic changes that occur that make the offspring more likely to be very anxious or depressed, for example. So I really liked how, you know, Encanto obviously didn't get into all of that, but it did get into the fact that like the grandmother, Bruno's grandmother, had suffered a lot of trauma. I'm sorry, excuse me, his mom.
Yeah.
His mother had suffered a lot of trauma, and that kind of ended up fracturing the family. And how it can be really difficult if you are a survivor of trauma or a victim of trauma, how it can be really difficult for you to kind of empathize or recognize, rather, when you have kids who are also dealing with trauma. And maybe you do recognize that there's trauma there, but that you just don't know like how to deal with it. And I just really loved how this story was able to tell it, and how it basically just unfolded, and it's for kids, right?
Yeah.
Which is the wildest thing.
Yeah, because, you know, when I watched it too, it wasn't like, some of these themes didn't stick out until I like sat down and thought about it. But it's good that they put this in the movie, because it's a good talking point for a lot of families. Because, you know, you think about it, these kids are usually watching Disney movies with their parents or with family. So it's good that it's in there, because, you know, Mirabelle has, you know, she deals with being like the glue to her family. There's always that person in the family, right? Then you have her sister Isabel, who's dealing with like perfection, like she's expected to be perfect. So, but on the inside, she's like, I'm not perfect. And then you have the other sister, Luisa, who's like expected to be super strong in every way. And she's like, there's times when I'm not strong, you know? And so there's always that person in your family. So I'm glad that this movie kind of tackles all of those things.
Yeah, for sure. Because when I think about the Disney shows, not Disney shows, but Disney movies of my youth, it was like, they weren't making any. It was like Cinderella, Snow White, you know, and it was basically like, oh my God, I have to be cute so I can find a man. And then like all my answers, like all my parents would be, yeah, I can find my Prince Charming, which is like, huh? Like, this is stupid. So I was really, really impressed that Disney was able to really tackle this on. When it comes to Bruno, you know, my first thought as far as diagnosis is, you know, my first thought was, okay, this is somebody who may have schizophrenia. Some of the things that like his visions, which could also, you know, be, I mean, I think it can be kind of analogous to hallucinations, you know, and especially in terms of like him being able to foresee the future. You know, that may have to do with like hallucinations or delusions. But I just love the fact that at the end, he wasn't ostracized. And when he reunites with his mom, like his mom was just so happy to see him. And it wasn't like, oh my God, like you're crazy, or what's wrong with you, or, you know, why are you living, you know, in the house and, you know, trying to patch things up with spackle. And I mean, it was just like, this movie was just so dope.
I don't know, that part I thought he was a little crazy for, like, bro, you live in the walls, like, you know. That part I was like, Bruno, you either need to just leave, like don't live in the walls. That's creepy, okay?
I mean, yes, it was definitely creepy. I mean, having a whole bunch of rat friends was creepy too.
Right.
But I mean, I even love the fact that, like, you know, like Bruno's outfits were kind of like dark, you know, because he lived like he was in hiding. But I really just love the inclusiveness of this movie. I loved, you know, again, this song where everybody's basically saying like, oh, we don't talk about him. Like, we don't talk about him because, you know, like it's just too painful. But it did something about this movie reminded me of this. There was a story that was written by, it was in the Washington Post, and it was by this guy named Dick Russell. And this guy, Dick Russell, has a son who's an adult, and his son is schizophrenic. And one of the things that I remember in training when I was a psychiatry resident learning about is that when it comes to people who have a psychotic disorder like schizophrenia, let's say, the worldwide, schizophrenics actually fare better in societies that are not very westernized, because they're not ostracized. Like their delusions, their hallucinations are more so seen as a gift. And so this man, Dick Russell, has a son, and his son was on medications and gained all this weight and you know, was at risk for diabetes, or did develop diabetes because of it was a side effect of the medications. But that being said, he took his son to Western Africa and was able to have his son spend time with a shaman there, and how this particular shaman basically taught him to kind of lean into his symptoms, as we would say in Western medicine, which made him feel validated, and he didn't feel like ostracized from society, and he actually you know, did really well during his time over there. And so it's right, like it's really cool. Something that's also interesting when it comes to psychotic disorders is that the more westernized a society, and I'm very much oversimplifying, but the more westernized a society gets, the more like the likelihood increases that people who have psychotic disorders experience paranoia.
Okay.
So like, if you know, like think of the 24-hour news cycle. And it's like, you know, shootings and like robberies and this happened and that happened. It's like when you live in a society where that is oftentimes reported, let's say, I think, and this is me just kind of postulating, I think that it tends to manifest itself in people who have psychotic disorders as having their delusions and hallucinations be more scary to them. Okay. Whereas if you're in whereas if you're in a society that isn't very westernized, it's, you know, and you're also being like applauded by the people in your society, like, oh my God, like you hallucinate, like that's so cool, like tell me about my future, or tell me about this, you know, it doesn't lead to the person feeling, you know, negative, or even experiencing like more, I would say more of the negative type symptoms of schizophrenia. So I just thought that was really interesting. And I thought that, you know, again, Encanto did a really good job of just embracing their relative who, it, you know, it is definitely of them and comes from them, but just, you know, his gift is a little bit different. So I really like that. And I thought this was a really like awesome movie. So good job, Disney, on, you know, presenting this to little kids, and also their parents, or their, you know, whoever took them to the movies that time. So that's it for Pop Culture Diagnosis. We're going to have another fun character to analyze next week. If you have suggestions for fictional characters out there that you want me to diagnose, hit me up on Twitter at Dr_Imani, or email the show at hello@imanistateofmind.com. Thank you so much for listening to Imani State of Mind. Thank you to Meg for co-hosting, as always. We'll be back for an all-new episode next week. And let's keep the conversation going. Follow the show on Instagram at Imani State of Mind. And again, email us at hello@imanistateofmind.com.